Marcus Hale's boots slipped on the slick, violet-hued ground as he ducked behind the jagged remains of what might once have been a starship, now nothing more than a twisted skeleton of metal and smoke. The wind carried strange electric currents, snapping in the air with audible crackles that made him wince. Somewhere above, the sky churned like a painter had poured all the wrong colors into a single canvas, swirling turquoise, magenta, and faint streaks of gold. The creatures advancing toward him were unlike anything he had ever faced or imagined. They were humanoid in shape, yes, but with limbs that bent at angles human joints should never allow and faces that flickered like holograms in and out of coherence. One stumbled over a floating shard of debris and fell face first into the muck. Marcus couldn't help snorting at the sight, despite the bullets zipping past his helmet. "Great, even the aliens are clumsy," he muttered. "At least I'm not alone in looking ridiculous today." He raised his plasma rifle and squeezed the trigger, but the shots seemed to pass through the creatures as if they were made of mist. He cursed under his breath, scanning desperately for cover. His mind, normally a repository of calm tactical calculations, was now more like a blender of panic, caffeine, and bad luck. "I knew I should have taken accounting," he muttered, eyeing a broken console for protection. "At least numbers don't bite back." One of the creatures lunged at him with a slithering, mechanical appendage. Marcus dove sideways, rolling like he had practiced 1,000 times in training, only to skid into a glowing puddle of something that smelled faintly of fried onions. "Of course," he muttered, standing and shaking the residue off. "Why would today be easy?" Then she appeared. At first, Marcus thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, the sky's kaleidoscopic colors distorting what was really there. But no, the figure was real, stepping out of the swirling haze with a confidence that made him pause mid-crouch. She looked human, tall, slender, graceful, but her ears were impossibly long, arching upward like the delicate wings of a celestial creature. They twitched subtly with every motion, like antennae that detected the chaotic currents in the battlefield. Her hair was dark with streaks of silver that shimmered as if catching starlight that wasn't really there. And her eyes, Marcus didn't have a word for them. Bright, intelligent, and faintly mischievous, they scanned the field as if it were a game board and she already knew every move before it happened. She glanced at him and tilted her head. "You look like a grumpy earthling in need of guidance," she said, voice smooth with a lilting cadence that was almost musical. Marcus blinked, rifle midair, unsure if he should be insulted or relieved. "I am not grumpy," he stammered. "I'm just tactical." She laughed softly, a sound that cut through the crackling energy and chaos of the battlefield. "Tactical, you're about to become lunch if we don't move." Before Marcus could respond, she flicked her hand, and one of the creatures nearest him was suddenly flung backward like a rag doll, hitting a jagged rock with a satisfying crunch. Marcus yelped and scrambled to his feet, eyes wide. Okay, you just did some magic thing, right? Right." She smirked and tilted her head again like she was amused by his disbelief. "Call it magic if you want. I call it physics with a sense of humor." They moved together through the battlefield, Marcus following her lead as she wove a path that defied all logic. One moment she was gliding across the shattered ground. The next, a burst of energy lifted her and him into the air to avoid a falling chunk of debris. She made jokes about the human armies, fascinatingly clumsy fashion sense, pointing at his dented armor, and Marcus, despite the adrenaline, let out a snort of laughter. "Yeah, well, at least my helmet isn't glowing neon like yours," he shot back, and she laughed, a musical trill that carried over the chaos. At one point, a creature lunged at them from the side, its appendages snapping like whips. Marcus tried to aim, but the rifle's targeting system kept glitching in the stormy currents of energy in the air. Liara, he learned her name quickly, simply waved her hand, and the creature froze mid-lunge, suspended in a strange bubble of distorted gravity. "See," she said, smirking, "physics is my friend sometimes when it's polite." Marcus stared, mouth slightly open, I'm definitely outclassed. She grinned, the tips of her ears twitching. Good, then you'll pay attention. As they maneuvered through the battlefield, Marcus noticed small, peculiar things about her. Her long ears seemed to pick up vibrations he couldn't sense. Sometimes she would pause mid-stride, cocking her head, and without a word, a trap of energy or a shifted gravitational field would neutralize a creature before it reached them. She moved with grace and purpose, yet there was a playful, almost teasing quality to it. Once, she flicked a creature into a shallow crater, and it bounced comically before scrambling angrily to regain composure. I told it to mind its manners, she said, shrugging, like she was explaining a polite etiquette violation. Marcus couldn't help but laugh, ducking behind another jagged metal pillar. I'm supposed to be the soldier here, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Why am I getting comedy lessons too? Liara tossed him a small device that hummed faintly. Not lessons, observations. You'll need them if we're going to survive this day without both of us becoming squashed like interstellar pancakes. Marcus caught it and inspected it quickly. And what does this do? Cause explosions, heal me, make me coffee. She gave him a look that was equal parts amusement and exasperation. Try not to get us killed while you figure it out. It has a function, but more importantly, it has a sense of humor. Kind of like you, eventually. They reached the crest of a ridge, looking down at the advancing army of creatures. Marcus was panting, adrenaline pumping through him, and despite the danger, he couldn't stop himself from muttering, "This is insane." Liara's eyes twinkled. "Yes, insane, but manageable if you follow my lead, and you do as I say or at least try to look convincing while panicking." She twirled slightly, extending her hand in invitation. "Dance with me through this chaos." Marcus stared. "Dance? Are you serious?" She laughed, a clear, musical sound as the wind whipped her hair around. "Absolutely. It's the only way to survive with style." He groaned but complied, hopping awkwardly in rhythm with her, as they darted, spun, and dodged through the battlefield. The creatures hesitated, confused by their erratic but oddly coordinated movement. Marcus's heart pounded, but laughter bubbled through his fear, mingling with the surreal spectacle around him. And then, as they prepared to make their next move, he realized something crucial. He wasn't just following Liara. He was starting to trust her. In this alien, impossible place with strange weapons, floating debris, and a sky that looked like an exploding kaleidoscope, trust, and maybe a little humor, was going to be the only way to survive. The creatures closed in, but for the first time Marcus didn't panic completely. He raised his rifle, glanced at Liara, and grinned despite himself. "Okay, grumpy earthling reporting for duty. Let's see what you've got." Liara's ears twitched, her eyes sparkling with amusement, and she gave him a small nod. "That's the spirit. Now hold onto your hat. Things are about to get interesting." And as the sky pulsed with energy and the battlefield trembled beneath them, Marcus realized that surviving this day wasn't just about weapons or tactics. It was about improvisation, partnership, and somehow, laughing in the face of interstellar chaos. Marcus and Liara moved cautiously through the shattered remnants of what might once have been a thriving outpost, now reduced to jagged metal and smoking craters that hissed with stray energy currents. The wind still carried faint sparks, like fireflies trapped in electricity, and Marcus had long ago stopped trying to keep his boots clean. Liara led the way, her long ears twitching in time with the faintest vibrations, sensing threats before they appeared. Marcus found himself both terrified and oddly comforted by her presence, like having a predator on your side that was too clever to ever let you die. "So," he said, trying to sound casual, "do those ears also let you read minds, or just annoy people who stare too long?" Liara gave him a sidelong glance, smirk tugging at her lips. "Mostly annoy. But occasionally, yes, I can sense a vague sense of impending doom, which seems relevant right now." As they rounded a scorched corner, a cluster of the creatures appeared ahead, moving in tight formation. Marcus fumbled with his rifle, muttering, "Oh great, The squad's having a team meeting without me." Liara rolled her eyes and flicked her hand. One creature froze mid-step, as if stuck in invisible molasses, then slowly toppled sideways in a theatrical collapse. Marcus blinked. "Okay, what was that?" "Gravity soup." Liara laughed, a lilting sound that seemed entirely out of place among the wreckage. "I call it controlled improvisation," she said. "You'll learn to love it, maybe." They crept closer, ducking behind shards of twisted metal and floating debris. Marcus tried to stay focused on the mission, but he couldn't help noticing the faint glow that seemed to trail Liara wherever she went, the shimmering aura that pulsed in rhythm with her movements. "You know," he said, "for someone who's clearly an intergalactic superhero, you sure have a thing for dramatic flair." Liara flicked a silver-streaked strand of hair from her face. "Why survive boringly when you can survive with panache?" Marcus grinned despite himself, then froze as one of the creatures pivoted unnaturally, its jointed limbs spinning in impossible directions. He raised his rifle, but Liara waved him down with a teasing glare. "No shooting yet. You're supposed to follow my lead, remember." Marcus muttered under his breath, "Oh, right. Follow the dancing alien lady. Makes perfect sense." Liara's ears twitched at his muttering, and she tilted her head, smirking. "Careful, Captain. The sarcasm will trigger my next tactic, and it's less fun for humans." She crouched and pressed her palms against the ground, and the area around them shimmered. The creatures ahead paused, confused by the sudden ripple in the terrain. Marcus's eyes widened. "What is that? A hologram, wormhole, some kind of interdimensional whoopee cushion?" Liara chuckled. "Close enough. Let's call it tactical misdirection. You'll see why it's fun in a second." With a dramatic flourish, she shifted her hands again, and the creatures began attacking each other, bewildered by illusory duplicates of Marcus and Liara that darted unpredictably through the debris. One creature even tried to jump on its own shadow, spinning in a dizzying circle before stumbling into a crater. Marcus laughed aloud despite the danger. "This is the weirdest battle I've ever fought in." Liara quipped, "Wait until we add confetti cannons. Just kidding, or maybe not." As they pressed forward, Marcus began to notice subtle changes in Liara's behavior. She moved with a grace that seemed effortless, yet there was an almost playful teasing in the way she positioned herself, prompting Marcus to mimic her movements, which made them a strangely synchronized pair. He tripped once on a jagged shard of metal, yelping, and Liara rolled her eyes. "You're supposed to gracefully dodge, not audition for a slapstick show." Marcus shot back, grinning through the adrenaline. "I think slapstick has a better survival rate, honestly." They came to a ridge overlooking a wider battlefield, the ground below littered with both enemies and the remains of past skirmishes. Marcus squinted at the horizon, trying to calculate odds, but Liara's long ears twitched, sensing currents of energy he could not perceive. "What are you seeing?" he asked, genuinely curious. "The path ahead," she said, pointing with a slender finger, "is fraught with energetic turbulence. Some of it will knock you sideways, some will make you float, some," she trailed off with a mischievous grin, "will probably tickle. You'll know when it happens." Marcus groaned. "Tickle, really? This is a battlefield, not a spa day." They began to descend, moving carefully through unstable energy currents that bent gravity unpredictably. Marcus had learned by now that following Liara's lead, though occasionally humbling, was the safest way to proceed. He laughed nervously as he drifted slightly off the ground, carried by one of her subtle manipulations of gravitational fields. "I always wanted to fly," he muttered, "but I was thinking more like a plane, less like a panicked flea." Liara's eyes sparkled. "You'll survive better panicked than grounded, trust me." Midway through their descent, a cluster of creatures emerged, blocking the only visible path forward. Marcus raised his rifle automatically, but Liara shook her head. "Weapons first, brains second," she said with a grin. She pressed her palms together, and the ground beneath the creatures began to ripple, forming a distorted field that made them stumble and collide with each other. One creature's leg got caught in the air like a failed ballet move, and Marcus couldn't resist snorting with laughter. "I think your physics is broken," he said. Liara tilted her head, ears twitching. "It's not broken, it's applied creatively." After a tense but humor-filled skirmish, they finally reached a narrow canyon where the energy current slowed just enough for Marcus to catch his breath. Liara turned to him, her expression softening though still carrying a teasing edge. "You're not half bad for a human," she said. Marcus arched an eyebrow. "Not half bad. That's like saying a cup of water is not half empty. Could you be more precise?" Liara laughed, a sound that seemed to shimmer in the canyon walls. "You survived this far, that's precision enough, for now." Marcus studied her as she adjusted a small device strapped to her wrist, the faint hum resonating in the canyon. "So you've got gadgets, gravity tricks, psychic ears, and a sense of humor. What's left? Fireworks?" Liara's ears twitched in amusement. "Something like that. But first, you need to stop thinking in linear human terms. Survival here requires improvisation, timing, and a little bit of ridiculousness. And if you get the rhythm right, even an impossible situation can become manageable." He shook his head, smiling despite exhaustion. "I think I'll need a guidebook for alien improvisational combat, preferably with pictures." Liara flicked her hand, and a small holographic display sprang to life in front of him, projecting a cartoonish diagram of their surroundings with arrows pointing every which way. "Consider this your field manual, humor included, optional but highly recommended." As they continued through the canyon, dodging energy spikes, floating debris, and occasional creatures, Marcus realized something he hadn't before. Liara's methods were unconventional, chaotic even, but they were effective. And beneath the jokes, the teasing, and the surreal physics, there was a meticulous logic that he was slowly beginning to understand. Every movement, every quip, every odd gesture was part of a larger strategy, a hidden pattern he had yet to fully comprehend. At one point, Marcus tripped over a glowing rock and tumbled into a shallow stream of energy that lifted him slightly off the ground. He landed awkwardly, brushing himself off. "Okay," he muttered, "I officially hate physics and gravity, and this entire canyon." Liara laughed, extending a hand to help him up. "Welcome to interstellar combat with style. You'll get used to it, eventually, maybe." By the time they emerged from the canyon, Marcus's mind was exhausted but clearer than it had been in hours. He realized that he was beginning to trust Liara, not blindly, but instinctively, and that in the midst of chaos, laughter, and surreal tactics, there was a method to her madness. She was preparing him for something larger, a move she hadn't revealed yet, and Marcus understood, for the first time, that the impossible situation they faced was about to become something more than just a test of firepower. It was going to test his ability to trust, to improvise, and to embrace the unexpected, with a grin on his face if possible. Marcus Hale crouched behind the jagged edge of a cliff, his armor scorched and dented, and his hands trembling from adrenaline and exhaustion. Below them, the alien army surged like a living tide, biolimbs flailing, energy pulses flashing across the terrain. Every instinct told him to run, hide, or invent an improbable excuse to surrender, but Liara stood beside him, calm, poised, and impossibly graceful. Her long ears twitched, sensing currents in the chaotic battlefield that Marcus couldn't even imagine, and her eyes sparkled with that teasing glint that made him simultaneously nervous and reassured. "So," Marcus muttered, "this is it, huh? The end-of-the-line cliffhanger." Liara tilted her head, smirk curling her lips. "End of the line? Hardly. More like the intermission before the grand finale." He groaned, "Intermission? I didn't even get popcorn yet." Liara chuckled, a melodic sound that cut through the electric crackle of the sky. "No time for snacks, Captain, but you will get to survive if you follow instructions and keep up your sense of humor." She gestured to a narrow ridge that snaked down into the chaos below. Marcus eyed it dubiously. "Sense of humor, huh? I think I left mine back at the first crater." Liara flicked her hand, and the ridge seemed to shimmer and bend, gravity twisting subtly. "It's under your boots now. Trust it." Hesitant but obedient, Marcus followed her lead, leaping onto the ridge as it twisted beneath him, adjusting his balance against the warped gravity with every step. The alien creatures below turned toward them, their unnatural senses failing to perceive the subtle distortions in space Liara had woven. One tried to lunge at him, but instead floated helplessly for a few seconds before spinning and landing in a tangle with another creature, which Marcus couldn't resist snorting at. "Looks like they need a manual in Gravity 101, he muttered. Liara's eyes glinted. "Good, keep laughing. It keeps your reflexes sharp." Marcus grumbled but complied, bouncing along the ridge with her as she guided him. Then she stopped abruptly, raising a hand. "Here, this is it, the secret move." Marcus peered down the ridge, trying to see what she meant. "The secret move? Is it a weapon, a grenade, a really angry space cat?" Liara smirked. "Nothing so mundane. Stand back and try not to panic." She pressed both palms to the ground, and the ridge pulsed with energy, glowing faintly in sync with her heartbeat. Marcus felt a strange pull, like invisible threads tugging at him, lifting him slightly off the surface. "Oh," he muttered, "that's uncomfortable." Liara's ears twitched. "Focus, Captain, trust me." With a subtle flick of her fingers, the space around the alien army shimmered and multiplied. Illusory duplicates of Marcus and Liara appeared everywhere, darting, jumping, spinning, and confusing the creatures. Marcus tried to move in sync with the duplicates, tripping over his own feet once or twice and muttering complaints, but the resulting chaos among the enemy ranks was spectacular. One creature got tangled in the gravity ripple and floated like a spinning top, screaming indignantly. This is insane," Marcus yelled, laughter and disbelief mixing in his voice. Liara grinned. "Exactly, but it works. And it's just the beginning." She tapped a small device on her wrist, and a series of narrow gravity channels opened across the battlefield, subtly redirecting enemy movements. Marcus watched as creatures collided, tumbled, and scrambled, unable to coordinate, while he and Liara danced along the ridge, striking with pinpoint precision. Marcus felt his confidence growing. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was anticipating, improvising, and even laughing through the chaos. "You know," he shouted over the crackling energy, "I might actually like this." Liara laughed, the sound bright and musical. "Careful, Captain, that's how they get you." Suddenly, a massive creature, larger, faster, and angrier than the rest, broke through the illusions. Marcus froze, rifle ready but useless in this gravity-distorted melee. Liara's ears twitched as she assessed the threat. "It's coming for us. I need you to trust entirely." Marcus swallowed. "Trust entirely, that's comforting." Liara's hands moved in a blur, weaving energy currents, bending gravity, and projecting force fields that deflected the creature's attacks. "Jump!" she shouted. Marcus leaped, barely keeping his balance, and found himself propelled above the ridge by a gravitational lift. The massive creature slammed into the ridge, sliding helplessly along the warped terrain, and then, suddenly, its limbs became tangled in energy threads that Liara had invisibly snared. Marcus's laughter escaped before he could stop it. You just tied it in knots. That's incredible." Liara's grin was radiant. "Told you, improvisation with style." The rest of the alien army began to falter under the same tactic, confusion and gravity manipulations scattering them. Marcus and Liara moved together, striking where needed, dodging where necessary, and coordinating as if the battlefield itself had become an elaborate game of cosmic chess. He realized then that he had changed. The grizzled, cautious soldier who only trusted plans and orders was gone, replaced by someone capable of improvisation, humor, and trust, even in the most impossible situations. As the last of the creatures fell or fled, Marcus dropped to his knees, gasping, exhilarated, and exhausted. Liara landed beside him, brushing a streak of glowing dust from her hair. "Congratulations, Captain. You survived." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "We survived. You're the one with the secret move and the long ears and the ridiculous gravity tricks. I just tripped a lot and laughed." Liara laughed, her ears flicking with amusement. "You contributed. Sometimes tripping and laughing is exactly what a battlefield needs." Marcus surveyed the cleared battlefield, the energy storms dying down and the alien sky slowly returning to its swirling but calmer state. "So, what now?" he asked. Liara tilted her head, thoughtful. "Now we make sure the survivors get home, we tidy up the mess, and maybe we start thinking about a little interstellar diplomacy." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Diplomacy? I can barely handle you giving orders," with a smirk. Liara laughed, extending a hand. "Then you'll learn, slowly and humorously." As they began to walk away from the battlefield, Marcus felt lighter than he had in months. The exhaustion mingled with exhilaration, the fear replaced with a strange satisfaction. He realized he had grown, not just in skill or courage, but in perspective. He had learned to trust, to improvise, to laugh even in the most absurd and dangerous circumstances. And he had discovered something he never expected. That survival wasn't just about tactics or firepower. It was about connection, teamwork, and occasionally, letting yourself dance on the edge of chaos with a partner who could bend reality with a smirk. Liara glanced at him, her long ears twitching, and grinned. "Next mission, you owe me at least one sarcastic quip for every life saved." Marcus groaned dramatically. "Do I get a manual first? Or is humor mandatory, no exceptions?" Liara laughed, flicking her hand, sending a small harmless spark into the air. "Mandatory, no exceptions, but trust me, you'll enjoy it." As they stepped into the quiet aftermath, leaving the fallen creatures and distorted terrain behind, Marcus realized he was no longer the same soldier who had cowered behind the starship skeleton hours ago. He had faced impossible odds, survived with laughter, and discovered that the strangest alliances often produce the strongest victories. Together, he and Liara walked onward, a soldier and an alien woman, bonded by chaos, humor, and the kind of trust that could turn even an impossible situation into triumph. The stars above twinkled in unfamiliar colors, the battlefield silent except for the faint hum of dissipating energy currents, and Marcus couldn't help but grin. "You know," he said, "maybe I'm starting to like this intergalactic chaos after all." Liara tilted her head, ears twitching with amusement. "I knew you would, eventually. Let's hope the universe is ready for you, Captain." And with that, they disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind the echoes of impossible battles, laughter, and the undeniable proof that trust, ingenuity, and a well-timed sense of humor could conquer even the most absurdly insurmountable